Of
to send it to
course.
you.
How do you put my thing on mute?
Just
Oh,
click it.
Bart, that wouldn't be any fun if we put you on mute.
Just keep your mouth closed. That'll be good.
Mark cannot keep his mouth shut. Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah, and he says you're stalking him, so he's.
I am. I don't care.
You
It's out there.
Do you realize how much you just caused me? Now I got to edit this out. Thanks.
So we want to start with the nice things we can send to
Oh,
Laurel's
for
boss at
heaven's
Kim
sake.
State.
Okay, I was going to say we have 40 plus
I
odd
want to
numbers.
hear snoring. Microphone's on. I want to hear it all.
We have 40 plus members in this club, and every one of them is a gem, really. And I would encourage you to listen to the Pathways to Careers interviews because they're quite good. Chris has a talent for bringing out the best or worst in people, and so they're all very good. And Laurel is one of those interviews that you need to look at, and you'd find out that our guide from Kent State University External Engagement Officer is the proud mom of two chihuahuas and would have been a lawyer if she hadn't had so many parking tickets. So she couldn't get her transcripts released because she had too many parking tickets. And so she decided to be a roving philanthropist, which is the love of all humankind, I guess. But so Laurel's talk is about a journey to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and she will give us pictures that show the landscape of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which all of you know has been the site of really a lot of heartache back since the early 90s when the whole Yugoslavian country broke apart with the disappearance of Tito. And so Laurel Wirtanen-Siloy is our speaker today, and you're free to start anytime you want.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about a journey to Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has granted me so much. It's led me to understand my purpose and calling in the world. So I'm glad that I was given the opportunity to share about why this heart-shaped country in Southeastern Europe played such an important role in my life. So can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
I'm not exactly a Zoom tech whiz kid, so tonight's I will be your guide tonight, taking you through Bosnia and Herzegovina to understand the beauty of the country, not only in the landscape, but also in the people. And my mouse is squiggling all over the place. Sorry about that. About me, I am the Philanthropic Globetrotter. All of my travel is based in gratitude. Why is that? Because my life is about beating the odds, and the fact that I've seen 32 countries is a miracle. So a little bit about me that wasn't in anything I've shared with this group before, but I beat the odds. The people who brought me into the world wished to take me out of the world, and I was struggling to survive and left orphaned in rural Honduras. Fortunately, I survived, and not only did I survive, but I was placed with the most loving and perfect family in Cleveland, Ohio. Erwin Wirtanen with roots from Finland, and Barbara Gut with roots from Poland. This was my first passport picture, and the picture next to it was me next to Lagoa de Furnas in the Azores just this past November. I have seen great places on my bucket list, from Valle de Cocora in Colombia, the Northern Lights in the Swedish Lapland, Petra, Jordan, and Crater Lakes Sete Cidades. I can't, my Portuguese is really struggling, but Crater Lakes in the Azores. But sometimes travel calls one for purpose and a better understanding of humanity. In December of 2022, I wanted to explore the land of my mother's roots, Poland. During my journey in Poland, I paid tribute to the 1.2 million people who were murdered and perished at Auschwitz-Birkenau. In January of 2023, I attended a Holocaust memorial event hosted by a nonprofit in the United Kingdom because I feel like I was now obligated to learn more about the dark time in history, about why these things happen, hear from the survivors, hear from the historians on how do we eradicate the genocide. I was supposed to go to Switzerland for spring break of 2023 because, I mean, what adult doesn't take an adult spring break? I was going to go there and realized that most of the trails were closed because it was still winter and they didn't want to risk an avalanche. And a speaker from Bosnia spoke at this Holocaust Memorial event, and he spoke about his experience in Bosnia during the war. And I felt like it was a sign from the universe. I wasn't meant to explore the lakes of Interlaken, Switzerland, but better understand humanity in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So why Bosnia and Herzegovina? It's gorgeous. I wanted to understand history. But as a Latina vegan, I wasn't expecting to gain so much from this heart-shaped country. Bosnia has magnificent nature, majestic trees, rugged mountains, gorges, canyons, placid lakes, and waterfalls that just continue for kilometers and kilometers. They have beautiful bridges that are, hold on one moment. I have a very impatient chihuahua with me who's saying that he's not interested in this, so I'll have to take care of him. Go on. These bridges are significant. They are just a beautiful sight to look at. I wasn't really into architecture until I made my journey to this Balkan nation. They are. Do you want to go sit up there? Okay, you'll watch the presentation from afar. Right, aqua lakes. They're just a sight to be seen.
Is that the Danube, Laura?
No, it is the river. Oh gosh, it starts with a D. I can't remember. Drina.
Okay.
It's the river Drina. So this bridge right here, the bridge is over troubled waters. Something happened of significance at this bridge in 1914. This is in Sarajevo. Does anyone have any idea of what that would be?
The murder of King Ferdinand of Austria.
Yes. So this pink building right over here, this corner, is where Archduke Ferdinand and Princess Sophia were assassinated by a Serbian who did not like the monarchies of Europe and said that it's time that the people rule these countries. And with that, World War I started. Another bridge of significance in Bosnia and Herzegovina is this bridge. This is a bridge that during World War II, then General Tito blew up all of the bridges in this area to ward off the Nazis. And with that, the Nazis were no longer able to occupy the then Yugoslavia. An interesting fact about Yugoslavia is that there were two versions of Yugoslavia, a Yugoslavia that formed after World War I and a Yugoslavia that formed after World War II. When the Nazis occupied this area, the country basically fell apart. Croatia somewhat had a puppet government who aligned themselves with the Nazis, and the rest of the Yugoslavia were kind of trying to align themselves with the Allied forces. The culture of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During the time of after World War II, up until the late 1990s, they had one of the strongest passports in the world. Why is that? It was because that they had okay relations with Russia, with the East and the West. So they were considered to have one of the world's strongest passports, meaning that they could easily get into many different countries in the world.
Right.
In 1984, Sarajevo was the site of the Olympics, and everything was very idealistic there. Bosnia and Herzegovina, from the former Yugoslavia, was one of the most diverse areas. It had a majority of Bosnian Muslims, also called Bosniaks, but they comprised about 50% of the population. The country also consisted of Catholic Croatians, Serbian Orthodox, and a good number of Slovenians and Jews, amongst other people. So they were kind of the model of diversity, a melting pot, a place where people saw people for people. People were Yugoslavian before they were any of their identities. And even in today's modern Bosnia and Herzegovina, where there is a Muslim majority, I would say religion isn't taken all that seriously. It's rare to, I don't want to say it was rare, but it's definitely considered to be one of the most liberal Muslim majority countries. And people will say, we just like to get to know each other rather than see each other for our identities. The language spoken in this country is Bosnian, which is the same as Serbian, Croatian, and Montenegrin. Montenegrin and Serbian sometimes use the Cyrillic alphabet. And an interesting thing about the culture in Sarajevo, they say that there is the sound of Sarajevo, which is the sound of the call to prayer that's playing at the same time as the church bells from the Catholic and Orthodox churches. There's literally a street in Sarajevo where there's a line and it says where the East meets West. Sometimes when you look around Sarajevo and other cities in this country, you will look at one corner and it seems like it's kind of a Germanic Austrian look to it. And then you look somewhere else and it looks Turkish Ottoman. And then you look somewhere else and it looks like that brutalist, socialist, communist architecture. So it's really a place of many cultures coming together as one. It's a warm and inviting country, even though sometimes to English speakers, Spanish speakers, Slavic languages sound kind of harsh, but their hearts are very warm and inviting. Yugoslavia will translate to Southern Slavs, and Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of Southern Slavs. You can see in this picture over here, these chocolates. So this, and I'll talk about this tour later, but I went in someone's home and they had a light lunch for us. And this was the dessert that she prepared for me and one other person. And I thought, I can't possibly eat all of this food at once, but that's typical Bosnian culture. They invited us to play chess with them in the middle of Sarajevo. And the last picture of the couple it's to my right, is the couple wishing us farewell after we visited them in their home. They just it's kind of tradition over there to wave guests goodbye. The coffee is my favorite coffee in the world. Coffee in Bosnia is a slow process. People don't get a cup of coffee and expect it to be served to them in 1 minute. This is similar to Turkish coffee, where there's a sugar cube and you dunk the sugar cube in the coffee from here that you pour in this cup. So you dunk the sugar cube in this cup and then bite it and then take a sip of coffee and then nibble on the Turkish delight. Now, they'll get through an entire sugar cube and Turkish delight in one sitting, but I personally thought that was a little bit too much sugar, but they say YOLO, let love grow. There's a lot of quirk and personality in the city. And for the dog, Jim, hi. Oh, who's joining us there? Someone's joining us. I'm a very much dog-oriented person. I mean, I have a cat, but only an inherited one. They're a very cat-centric society. They love their kitties. So if you talk to people from Bosnia, they'll say, we really prefer the cats to the dogs, but I won't hold that against them. There's so many wonderful things about this country, but what I really fell in love with was the resilience of the Bosnian people, all that they have endured, and they are welcoming, kind, and really wanting to tell the world why peace is so important. I was really kind of surprised that even though this isn't it's not the wealthiest country, but the moment that the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine started, they were there supporting the people because they said, we know what you're going through. The same thing, very similar thing happened to us in 1992. They continue to be one of the strongest allies of Ukraine, even though about a third of the country is Serbian, and they tend to have stronger alliances with Russia. But they really want to do what they can to help the people over there. And it's very common for them to say, what can we do to help you? Some quick facts about the Bosnian War. Bosnia declares independence from Yugoslavia. Basically, there were member nations of Yugoslavia who could vote whether or not they stayed a part of the federation. Everyone except, and I have a map there, everyone except for Serbia and Montenegro voted to go our separate ways. We'll become independent countries. Serbia, under the rule of Slobodan Milosevic, said, not so fast there. You're always going to be a part of us, Yugoslavia, led by me, Milosevic. Some numbers on Bosnia before the war started. 4.3 million people lived in the country before the war. Approximately 250,000 were killed through war or genocide. Some numbers have it at 100,000. I'm not sure why there is the discrepancy of the number. And 500,000 to 2 million people were displaced from this war. So almost 50% of the country could no longer go home because of the violence happening in their own backyard. There were many crimes against humanity committed under the leadership of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia and the puppet governor of the Serb portion of Bosnia, Radovan Karadzic. There were a total of 111 ICC trials for war criminals that resulted in 90 convictions and 21 acquittals. There were also 50 major trials for war crimes that were happening in the country. Sometimes the international courts decided that the local courts, either in Bosnia or Croatia, had a better chance at winning at trial. So they decided to send those cases back to the country. When I ask people what the cause of this was, they say polarization, divisiveness, and propaganda. Many will say before the war started that they pretty much got along. It wasn't this Muslim versus Catholic versus Orthodox situation, but it became easy to believe the lies of propaganda. But today I'm not going to really get into a lot of facts about the war. I want to talk about the heart of the war, the thing that makes me, it's like we'll never rest until you've done everything possible to make world peace reality. It's like that cheesy line in Miss Congeniality, what do you want for the world? World peace. And you start out thinking, that's kind of cheesy and unrealistic. And then you think, but what if I can really be an instrument of peace and do one small step to make the world a better place, a more peaceful and tranquil place? What I learned from my time in this heart-shaped country is that war is more brutal than you can ever imagine. War sometimes gets started by megalomaniacs who want to be more cruel, more violent, and more horrific than the megalomaniac before them. For instance, Karadzic and Milosevic read Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, and they said, we want to replicate what was done, but make it worse. There were things that happened to people that make horror movies look like a My Little Pony show. I won't go into what brutal crimes happened to the people, but when I hear the stories, I literally could feel myself stop breathing. It's the stories in the parallel universe that help me understand why peace is so important in our world today. My childhood, my privilege. I picked out this Hello Kitty suitcase when my family was going to Walt Disney World. I wanted this suitcase because Hello Kitty was my favorite, and I needed a carry-on to take onto the plane. Filled with my coloring books, erasers. You always have to have an outfit because they might lose your luggage. That was even a concern back then. But I needed all that to get through the flight to Orlando, Florida from the CLE. That was my reality in childhood. Janita's everything was placed in this Miss Petticoat suitcase. This was a donation from UNICEF given to her in the middle of the war. She was so happy to receive it, so happy to be given the call that her and her family would be going to safety in Croatia. But safety was not her reality. She was held hostage for 3 days in a school bus, along with her sister and parent. Why? Just because. That's the cruel games that people play during war. My treat during my childhood was that I could get a Clearly Canadian after I had a super hot day at daycare camp. I hated those daycare camps because they didn't have air conditioning. My other treat was at the end of my dance class, I would go to Dairy Queen and get a Blizzard with French fries and dunk the French fries into the Blizzard. And it was so delicious. And I thought everyone's childhood was like this. But that wasn't the reality for Mustafa. Mustafa would ride a bike like this when he was my age. During the war, I was about 12 to 16 years old. Mustafa is 2 months younger than me. He rode this bike to get water. Why did he need to get water? Because they cut clean water supply off to the residents of Sarajevo during the war. My stressors, would my hair look okay when I performed for the dance team? And would my pom-poms be puffed just right? Would my favorite color of Swatch watch be ready at the department store? I mean, sometimes it was orange, but whoever said orange is the new pink is seriously disturbed. And my perm, why wasn't my perm washing out of my hair? I didn't quite have Tracy Marcinko's bone structure. And I was really stressed that I would have to take my senior pictures looking like that. But this was stress for teenagers living during the Bosnian War. Mustafa had to go through these tunnels. They were about 5 miles long to get food because his food supply was cut off. That beautiful bridge that was in the picture earlier, this is what happened to it after the war or during the war. And my dear friend Emma saw her beautiful town of Mostar be destroyed by bombs and shells. I had the honor of meeting veterans during my first visit in Bosnia. This is Almir, and he was about 4 years older than me during the war. He was barely 15 years old when the war started, and he had to identify his brother at the morgue. He was shot as a soldier. He joined the military when he was about 17. He was shot, and my puppy doesn't want to hear this. And in a coma for about 6 months. The man sitting next to him has permanent damage from the war. He had a bullet go through his stomach and go out the back, and it created similar to a cyclone. So he'll never be functioning the same as he was before the war. I had the most interesting conversation with Almir during that 12-day, he took me on a tour to Srebrenica, which I'll talk about soon. about humanity. I wanted to know his thoughts. Are we born good or are we born evil? Because you've seen the worst of humanity. And he said that he thinks that we are born like a neutral slate. The environment around us can dictate who we become. But even though he's seen the worst of humanity and he's seen terrible things, he knows that good will always coexist amongst all the bad things that were happening during that time. He said he is a man of faith. He's a Muslim. And he said that in his faith that he is taught to hate the crime, but not the criminal. He said that if he harbors hate in his heart, that he becomes just as bad as the perpetrator. Srebrenica. When World War II ended, we learned about the horrors that happened during the Holocaust, the genocide of 6 million Jews being killed for their identity, and 6 million other people, Slavs, Russians, LGBTQ people, disabled, and the Roma, or anybody else who the regime saw as undesirable. We thought that never again would happen, but it didn't. Srebrenica, genocide was happening at the same time that the war was happening in Bosnia. Genocide was happening because people were being killed for their identity, for being Muslim. Srebrenica was one of the largest massacre sites during the war and is believed to have, within about a week, about 9,000, mostly men, were murdered. This is a picture of someone who was a soldier, who was returning home for the weekend from a battle, and he went home hoping to find those he loved. Unfortunately, he learned that they were killed during the genocide. The chain next to that is what they would use to bind people's wrists together so that there would be absolutely no fighting back. Not that they could really survive a gunshot wound to the head. I had the honor of meeting survivors of genocide through an experience with Funky Tours. And it's something where a veteran will take you to Srebrenica, the Srebrenica Memorial, and the veteran will tell you the story, and somebody who survived the genocide will invite you into their home. I had the privilege and honor of meeting Layla. Layla was 8 years old when the genocide happened. She was literally in a line, and they said that she could live. She went to the other side. She had to walk 17 miles in horrible heat to a safe zone. And if she made it, then she got to live. And thankfully, she made it with her mother. Unfortunately, the rest of her family did not survive. Layla said that her childhood was taken from her, but that she will do nothing but put love out into the universe. She says, because the more and more people put love into the world, it will counteract all of the people who put evil into the world. It was such an honor to meet her. And she gave me the flower of Srebrenica. And she said one thing. I said, so what do you want the world to know about your story? She's like, please just tell people that this happened in the first place. A lot of people don't believe in genocide and don't think these things happen. So please just let them know that this happened. She's such a kind woman. She gave me a hug. We took pictures, and she left just a huge place in my heart. Once I went to Bosnia in March of 23, I knew I had to return, and went back in December of 2023 and did a collection with my coworkers for a women's shelter in Srebrenica. I met with the mothers of Srebrenica. This group of women pictured here, all of them lost children because of the genocide, and some of them also lost their spouse. They testified against war criminals as recently as 2021. So they said that justice will happen. And they, as scared as they were to look at the perpetrator, they knew that they had to speak up and say something. But the place that ultimately stole my heart was War Childhood Museum. The mission of War Childhood Museum is to preserve and present the experiences of children who lived through conflict, ensuring that their voices continue to inspire empathy, resilience, and a commitment to peace. Behind every object is a story of hope, loss, and survival. This figurine was a gift that Maya's best friend gave her. Maya wanted a dog, like a dog like the one that I have right now who won't stop crying. Maya wanted a dog, but her parents said, it's war. It's not reality for us to have a dog right now. So her best friend gave her this porcelain dog, and she knew when the war would end that she would get her dog. Unfortunately, her friend died as a result of the war, but this gift reminds her of the best friend that she had during the worst of times. She did get that dog eventually. A war childhood is when you have a crush at school, but she is killed by a shell. These are some mementos that are in the War Childhood Museum. Now I laugh and will call myself the Ice Princess, but for some reason when I walked in there and I heard that quote, I just started sobbing and I couldn't stop. So this swing right here is what started the waterworks. This swing was made for a child by his grandfather because he couldn't really go out and play in Sarajevo. It wasn't safe. So he had this swing in his basement and he thought he had no idea that all these bad things were happening around him. His grandfather ended up dying and never came back home, and he was confused. As an adult, he looks back at this swing and thinks of the love that his grandfather had for him. Even though all these horrible things happen during war, one thing that also happens is hope and love. Life can sometimes, you want some type of normalcy. This is a gift that a child got for Christmas, and he just loved clean clothes, cute, clean clothes. And he just treasured this because he thought it was just a ray of sunshine, light, and hope. And during war, there's also the opposition within the perpetrators. The Milosevic troops took this violin away from a little boy because they knew he loved it. But when the troops would get drunk at the end of the night, the chef, who was Serbian, gave the boy his violin and said, I know that you love to play this, so while they're drunk, why don't you go relax and play the violin for the people in this community. He knew that he could pay with his life for doing that act of kindness, but he chose to do the right thing. And now I'm going to play a video about what the War Childhood Museum is exactly. Oops. Oopsies. So I think you can see why War Childhood Museum stole such a place in my heart. I became the voluntary philanthropic advisor, creating the strategic plan for this place that I see as much more than a museum, but a movement. I am also the president of the Friends of War Childhood Museum Board in the USA because I feel like the message is so important. Collecting memories, understand that when I talk to people who have lived through the darkest of times and people who understand these complex topics, they will say, it's not the facts about war, it's not the number of people who died, it's not the theories and methodologies that go behind why a megalomaniac does what they do. It's the humanistic stories that probably have the best chance at inspiring people to do something, to take action, to make a more peaceful existence reality. So, but don't just take my word for it. I'm going back in March of 2026, launching a program called the Philanthropic Globetrotter, where people can also experience the depth of humanity and see all the beautiful things that this heart-shaped country has to offer. So Philanthropic Globetrotter will be launched, and I make nothing off of it. It's just, I think it's important for people to learn about this, and that being there is one of the best ways to learn. But we have to work for peace. It's not up to a president. It's not up to our legislature. It's not up to our mayors. It's up to all of us to work for peace. How do we do that? We learn about things that happened in the past, even when they're difficult topics. We don't other people. We watch the words that we call other people. And I'm no saint. I know that sometimes when I don't agree with someone, depending on what it is, I don't think the kindest of thoughts of them, but I know that, and I know to keep it in check. But I know that each and every one of us can make world peace a reality. Rotary values peace. As a humanitarian organization, peace is a cornerstone of our mission. We believe when people work to create peace in their communities, that change can have a global effect. We have 4 roles in Rotary which promote peace: practitioners, educators, mediators, and advocates. And I know I'm at time, but I wanted to end with a quote by the world's most famous and well-known child who did not survive war, and that is Anna Frank. How wonderful it is that no one has to wait even a minute to gradually start changing the world. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about my journey in Bosnia and Herzegovina and these issues that are so important to me.
As I said, we have all sorts of gems in our club. And thank you very much, Laurel, for that presentation. It was very good. So any questions that anybody might have or comments? Feel free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a question. You describe yourself as a Philanthropic Globetrotter. Is this part of your research, or how did you choose to be on this journey?
The universe just placed me on this journey. I've always been interested in this topic. A dear friend of mine who was in this Rotary Club, Pacific Niyonzima, he kind of introduced me to some of this stuff. He survived the genocide in Rwanda. I've always kind of been interested in it. And everything else just kind of fell into place. I got a cheap ticket to Poland and could see everything that happened in that country. And then one thing just led to another. I reached out to War Childhood Museum because I do professional fundraising, and there was I think it was a $500 million grant opportunity that came across my desk, and I thought they qualified. So I reached out to them and said, "Hey, I'm your biggest fan. I think you qualified for this. I'm a professional fundraiser." And they said, "Oh, okay. Do you want to help volunteer with us?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" The rest is history.
All right, thanks. Thank you for what you do.
I just think this was fascinating, Laurel. Not to date myself, when I was a senior in high school, I was going to nationals for a Model UN at University of Chicago, and we started out as Yugoslavia, and then suddenly we turned into Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Oh, wow.
And so within about 2 weeks, and there was no internet to research anything, so it was all find all the newspapers and all the places, try to figure that out. But I think the story of resilience in Bosnia and Herzegovina is just such an inspiration for how, as awful, as bleak as things can be, there's a way to come out right on the other side. And I think that the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina have demonstrated that. My question is, did they get the grant?
You know what happened? They ended up not submitting it because
Oh,
they couldn't get all the documents in on time.
oh,
So, and it's through the MacArthur Foundation, and the
okay.
grant is available. I think it's every 4 years. So in 4 years, we're going to reapply
Have the
for it.
paperwork ready.
Yeah.
Cool.
There was one document that was missing. So it was a compliance document. So I said, we'll have to work on getting the compliance documents ready for the future.
So is that something where you could put a link in the chat or on our Facebook page or something like that so that others could learn more about the War Childhood Museum and how they would get involved in
Yes.
it?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And I forgot to mention the reason why I fell in love with it so much is that it doesn't only address the war happening to children in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but children who have been impacted by modern war for the most part. So we have an office in Kiev, and we just set up an exhibit in Lviv. And the Yasminko and Amina who were in that video, Yasminko must go to Kiev probably 6 times a year, and Amina goes about twice a year. So they're fully vested in helping alleviate the burden of war for the Ukrainians. But I will definitely drop that in the Facebook group.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Very, very meaningful. I was running a company in Austria in 1991 when Yugoslavia blew apart. And I remember one evening, Putzfrau, the cleaning lady, started talking to me, and her German wasn't the best, but it was okay. But I found out that they had left Bosnia, and she had a PhD in economics, and her husband had a degree in engineering. And they were doing what they called schwarze Arbeit, which is black market labor, where they could get paid in cash because they didn't have all of the papers. But both of them ended up going back to
Wow.
help to repair things. But I remember that. So it has a big impact on people.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. You mentioned about working for peace, right? By learning from the past. You know how quickly humans, as we forget, we repeat the same old things, and and still lives are being lost, and there's tons of frustration. Um, Gosh, any recommendations for us to not be there again another, like, I don't know, another 10, 15 years? Like for me, my country right now is a birth is at war, it's an internal war. I'm like, well, how could we what I mean, how could we transfer what is being learned now, for this to not keep happening?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a
I know
great
it's
question.
hard. It's really hard.
I mean, we sometimes say at War Childhood Museum, we wish we didn't have to exist because we wish we didn't have to preserve memories. We wish war didn't keep happening again and again and again. The root of war can be things like inequities or not thinking it can happen in your own backyard. That's one big point that they wanted to make with me when I went over there, and when I talk with people there, is they said, don't take your peace and freedom for granted, because we thought that we were this place of utopia. And then some of them will say it was like that. Others will say, well, there were tensions and everything wasn't perfect during Tito. But I think ensuring that we have just systems, equal systems, that we reconcile with each other too. It's not as prevalent in Bosnia, but I am also connected with a place in Rwanda, and they have reconciliation villages where the survivors learn to forgive the perpetrators and coexist with them. It's tough though. I think peace begins with all of us, but unfortunately there can be terrible leaders that just don't care.
Yeah.
But the more and more we pressure for peaceful conditions, and by that I mean justice, equality, understanding, trying to minimize divisiveness, and knowing the truth, knowing how to decipher fact from fiction, and that when you can do that, then propaganda is more difficult.
Yeah.
And it's hard to forget. I mean, they might forgive, but it's hard to forget.
Laurel, I just want to express my gratitude. You have left you have impacted me and left me speechless for a moment, but rest assured that everything's gone to my heart. And yes, I think I agree with you that peace starts with us, and that is a contribution that we can all make and become aware of all the blessings that we do have and not take them for granted. And well, in our hearts, we can express that in a different way, in our own personal manner, and make a contribution by having peace in our hearts, and let it radiate to in our own environments and in our families. Thank you. It's been an excellent, wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Laurel, if I could ask you to put out some reminders about your March 2026 trip.
Yes.
Put them out
I will.
leading up to the trip to see if maybe you get some of us to go with you.
And yeah, I'll have more information dropped shortly. I'm still working on the website, but because it's philanthropic in its nature, there's an optional book club with it. And then you have the opportunity to meet some leaders in peace education. And then the trip will include potentially meeting some people through Zoom that have won Nobel Peace Prizes. So I will be sure to share that information. And now that my puppy decided that maybe I could put him down for a second, mocha latte, I'll drop the link in the comments too.
Why did you get Chihuahuas? They're pretty high maintenance dogs, aren't they?
I said never Chihuahua, and then I adopted my first one through Pet Finder. And I said, I'm never going to get a Chihuahua. They're little yippy dogs, and I'm addicted to them. My heart's just filled with chihuahuas and Bosnia. And I am married, but the chihuahuas probably occupy the most space. They're very high maintenance and they're very lovable.
You know this is being recorded.